Dear Mr. President Dorneanu, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank you, Mr. President, for your kind invitation to this special event today. Although I cannot attend this meeting in person, it is a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to address, through this video message, the Romanian Constitutional Court on the occasion of its 30th anniversary. I believe that President Dorneanu and I probably hold similar views on the importance of national constitutional courts in Europe and their role in European integration. The Romanian and Hungarian constitutional courts have always sought close cooperation and managed to maintain good relations, especially in recent years. The two bodies have adopted similar approaches to European integration trends, which is clearly reflected in their decisions. In spite of having different constitutional traditions and constitutional culture, we share similar views on crucial issues such as constitutional identity and the role and responsibility of national constitutional courts in European integration. In the wake of Hans Kelsen's legacy, constitutional courts have played a crucial role in European legal systems. This is particularly true for the states of the post-Soviet period, such as Romania and Hungary, where these constitutional institutions safeguarded and guaranteed democratic transition after the regime change. Nowadays, the emergence of a new trend can be observed, which is obviously the result of multiplication of legal orders. It seems that the European supranational legal order is making attempts to prevail over national constitutional courts and at times even take over their function. In many cases, these tendencies can be detected in the decisions of the Court of Justice of the European Union, some of which have been handed down by the EU's legal forum in relation to Romania. In this context, I believe it is of particular importance that the constitutional courts of the member states should join forces and strengthen cooperation between themselves. In the process of European integration, the Constitutional Court of the Member States, as the authentic institutions for the interpretation of national constitutions, must play a decisive role. However, this requires that these bodies take a similar, if not the same, stance on issues affecting the European integration process. To achieve this, it is essential to be familiar with the decisions and practice of other national bodies. This is why the Hungarian Constitutional Court has been working for a year and a half on setting up a European Constitutional Court database, the aim of which is to make available in English as many European Constitutional Court decisions as possible for the partners institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 30 years, our constitutional courts have played a crucial role in establishing the democratic exercise of power and the rule of law in our countries. Our constitutional courts are the authentic interpreters and defenders of our country's constitutions. At the same time, we have to remember that at the outset of the EU integration in 1964, the CJEU established the principle of the primacy of EU law over national law, even over national constitutions. However, the application of the principle of primacy may in no way imply hegemony or absolute supremacy. This means that there must be such constitutional provisions in the constitutions of the member states against which the primacy of EU law cannot be enforced. Undoubtedly, Article 4, Paragraph 2 in the treaty, inter alia, refers to such exceptions. We must not forget that in the European Union, 28 sui generis legal systems must cooperate, the 27 national legal systems, and the EU legal system. I am convinced that the position of the German Federal Constitutional Court, which is based on the assumption that the responsibility for integration is a shared responsibility of the member states and the European Union can serve as a guideline for the future. Responsibility for integration is also joint responsibility of the constitutional courts of the member states and of the CJEU. It is this responsibility for integration that creates both the right and the obligation for national constitutional courts to examine the constitutional mandates on which the joint exercise of competencies between the European Union and the member states is based. We cannot overlook the disadvantages of having multiple jurisdictions within the European Union, whether 28 legal systems have to work together, which will inevitably create conflicts. Professor Ferdinand Kirchhoff, the former German constitutional judge, pointed out that the European courts and the constitutional courts of the member states must jointly build up the European community of law within the limits and mandates of the founding treaties. It is therefore important to emphasize that the CJEU's power to provide an authentic interpretation of the treaties should not be regarded as an interpretative hegemony. The final word in treaty interpretation is generally given by the CJEU, but the national constitutional courts must maintain the right to examine whether the EU acts adopted on the basis of national mandates that allow the exercise of shared competencies are compatible with the national constitutional requirements. We need to stress again that it is this right, the right to examine such EU acts, in which the responsibility of national constitutional courts for integration is embodied. These bodies, like the CJEU, are also responsible for the integration process. The responsibility for the integration is twofold. The responsibility of the constitutional courts is to ensure that the institution of the Union, including the CJEU itself, don't reach beyond the scope of the treaties, while the responsibility of the integration institutions is to keep the member states within the scope or framework of the treaties. The integration process must therefore be subject to control from both sides. The national constitutional courts, while defending their own constitutions, are able to preserve those elements of identity that are specific to a given constitutional system, stemming from its constitutional culture and the history of the nation. The big dilemma for the future is how the national traditions of each member state can be preserved within the European Union. In Europe, each and every person of European citizen is born into a given religious, historical and linguistic environment which may differ from nation to nation. This is a European specificity, but this is far from being a weakness. On the contrary, this is what gives Europe its strength. It is important that we should join forces around certain values and interests, which does not necessarily mean a preference for values, but rather a gradual development of shared values. The values contained in the founding treaties of the European Union are crucial, but these values need not always be seen in the same way by each member state, because special historical features must also be taken into account. The cornerstone and essence of European integration is that member states retain their sovereignty and unique identity while belonging to the community of European nations. There is no need for the EU institutions to protect the European Union and the European legal order from the member states. The European legal order is a sui generis legal order born of the will of the member states, capable of acting on the basis of their sovereignty. As such, it must ensure equal protection both for the member states and the integration process. The European community of law must be implemented jointly by the European courts and the constitutional courts of the member states within the limits and powers laid down in the treaties. Therefore, I strongly believe that the role of the national constitutional courts will be decisive in the coming decades, or perhaps even more so as it has been for the last 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.